Final Fantasy XIV and potentially other future Final Fantasy games are finally coming to Xbox. This was announced recently. I want to comb over the announcement, what exactly was said, and the response has been mixed. We've seen Sony fans being sort of nasty or upset about it. We've seen Xbox fans have to point fingers at Sony for why they've never been able to play Final Fantasy games up to this point. Interesting history lesson exactly into why you haven't been able to play Final Fantasy XIV will shock you. It had nothing to do with Sony. And we are going to be looking at some quotes from Yoshida to put that to bed, as well as IGN's own reporting, even though someone from IGN had to falsely frame this instead of just celebrating this and saying, hey, this is pretty exciting. That's what I did. I tweeted. I said, Final Fantasy XIV, that's a big title. It's a beloved title to suddenly land on Xbox. And even a good friend of mine had a really strong reaction to this, Ginger Prime. I want to talk about that. First, I want to talk about the real reason that Final Fantasy XIV never came to Xbox. It'll actually surprise you, given all of the false framing and lies that you hear about it's all PlayStation's fault. I want to speak to Ginger Prime's reaction. It kind of went viral. He got really emotional. Many people didn't understand what was going on. They thought that he just really liked Phil Spencer. He's a good dude. Let me explain what's going on there. Give me a moment to do that. But I also want to consider what other Final Fantasy games could come. There is a commitment here to future titles. So if you like this kind of content, I do quick breakdowns, shorter uploads like this, and then I also do live shows. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on that. So what happened? Just pulling from The Verge here, give you a quick summary. During the Final Fantasy XIV FanFest keynote, Microsoft Gaming CEO Phil Spencer appeared, and he announced the news alongside game director Naoki Yoshida. We want to bring the Xbox community, and your Warriors of Light together in a way that is safe, secure, engaging, and above all, fun. Now, the safe and secure thing is not an accident. He is saying that's referring to one of the real reasons that you have not been able to play Final Fantasy 14. Now, there is the commitment for future games. Phil Spencer also tweeted this: enjoy being on stage with Yoshi P and Kiru-san to announce Final Fantasy XIV coming to Xbox. We're thrilled that the Xbox community will join Warriors of Light, and we look forward to partnering closely with Square Enix on future games. Okay? Now, this will be taking place. Keep in mind that this MMORPG that you're suddenly getting on Xbox, it's been out since like 2013. This will be taking place in spring of 2024. Final Fantasy XIV is available right now on PC and PlayStation, but it has not been available on Xbox, which is what I want to talk about right now. Why? Why have you not been able to play this game? Well, it was because of an Xbox Live policy. Funny enough, IGN had an employee tweeting about this and not really celebrating it, being like, well, whenever games can come, right? Because they said future games they would like to bring to Xbox whenever it's possible. And he was like, yeah, whenever PlayStation doesn't pay to keep them off. Well, funny enough, the reason that Final Fantasy XIV has not come, according to IGN themselves back in 2013, they said the following in a video that many people were tweeting, quote, because Xbox policies don't support crossplay with other platforms. In an interview with RPG site, Naoki Yoshida explained that while PS3, PS4, and PC players will all be able to play with each other, the fact that Xbox users wouldn't be able to join the party turned the team off the idea. He revealed the policy had not changed on Microsoft's side. The main reason from our side is that I don't want the community to be divided. Very crystal clear here. This is hilarious in light of all of Microsoft has been doing lately with their marketing and promoting crossplay and play anywhere. Back in 2013, just 10 years ago, they were against it. They didn't allow it. Now, obviously, they've changed their tune. To their credit, they're very much pro crossplay now. They have plenty of cross-play games, and that has changed, which is probably why they're able to do this now. However, Yoshida seemed to almost give them the path forward in his response. He didn't stop there. He said the following. For example, one person might be on the PC version, another person on the PS4 version, and I'm on the Xbox version, but we're not able to join the same game servers. He says, I just disagree with it. Okay, pretty strong. And he went on even stronger. He said, to be frankly honest with you, there are now so many mobile devices, smartphones, everything. Why would you just stick to one platform from a hardware aspect? Just make it open to everyone. That's my opinion. Well, it seems it took Xbox 10 years to get the message. That's really their strategy going forward now. Mobile devices, cell phones, smart devices, play anywhere, crossplay. These are big selling points that Microsoft consistently pushes out there. So much of their strategy now centers around these things, so the timing makes sense. Now, IGN went on to say that, quote, Yoshida admits he wants as many people as possible to play his game, so from a business standpoint, it may make sense to release on Xbox platforms. But he says, quote, that would bring about the tragedy that somebody might have to give up their existing character. Then players might get frustrated, and then they ask us, Square Enix, can't you do something? It's pretty clear they didn't want to face a scenario where players encountered a problem or a frustration and was asking Square Enix, hey, what's the deal? Well, it's on Xbox. We can't help you, right? It's clear Final Fantasy XIV wanted to be everywhere. Xbox dug in their heels and said no. It's always interesting when you actually look at history instead of accepting revisionist history, falsehood, and smear from outlets that are supposed to research these things and give you the truth. They're seemingly unable to do that. Now, Sony did take their own turn being against crossplay. I'm not acting like Xbox was the only one against crossplay. Sony did it with Fortnite, and they finally accepted because they wanted better revenue share because so many of their players were playing and spending money. They didn't want them to suddenly be able to play somewhere else and spend that money, and then they would lose that revenue. I'm not defending that decision. I'm simply saying everybody was taking their turn, being sort of slow to come to the cross-play table. Also, keep in mind, one of the things that I think gets lost in the kerfuffle online about these things is that everyone wants to blame Sony for exclusivity with Square Enix. But what you're missing here is that Square Enix shops their property because they know it's incredibly valuable. Another great quote from Yoshida. When we begin development, we do approach multiple platforms, multiple companies about releasing the game. And when you approach them, they're going to come back to us with their offers. So again, you want to blame PlayStation for not getting Final Fantasy games. Square Enix seemingly knows their worth. They've built a really iconic and famous piece of property, and they shop it around. And it makes perfectly good sense that Sony easily outbids Xbox in these situations because Xbox knows we don't have a history with Final Fantasy. Our user base probably won't buy this game in droves. That's obviously a question about whether or not Final Fantasy XIV will be very successful on Xbox or not. But it landing on Xbox was celebrated. If you haven't seen the clip, check out Ginger Prime on YouTube or Twitter. The clip's everywhere. He put his own, discussion up about it. He kind of lost his mind. In a good way, I think. I love the guy. I know where he's coming from. Because when he heard Phil Spencer, he knew what that meant. Ginger Prime has been playing and covering Final Fantasy XIV for a very long time. Keep in mind the game has been coming out for 10 years. Much of his content has orbited around Final Fantasy XIV. He loves this game deeply, and he has advocated for this game to come to Xbox for the better part of the 10 years that it has been out. So the minute he heard Phil Spencer's name, everything fired at once in his brain. It was finally happening. All of his investment, all of his passion, all of his arguments, all of his advocating for this game to come to Xbox, he knew what Phil Spencer being at a Final Fantasy XIV event meant. It immediately landed on him. Many people say, well, why would you get this emotional about a video game? Well, ask that of your friend when the team he grew up cheering for. He spent a decade cheering for a baseball team or a football team with his dad, with his relatives, and they finally win the championship. And he gets emotional and he cries. Well, why? Because when you get that invested in something and it matters to you to that degree, and you're that passionate about it, and you defend it and you take up for it, and the good thing finally happens that you want to have happen, it can be a very, very strong and potent experience. I think many people are insecure. They're not able to show emotion. They sort of suppress them. I also think people really just struggle to see others happy. There's a lot of negativity out there. Everybody sort of wants to hate and bash. And I celebrated the clip. I thought, hey, this is great. This sort of unapologetic love for something is really, really cool to see. Now, many people misunderstood the clip. They thought, oh, he heard Phil Spencer. He's such a huge Xbox fan. He's literally losing his mind and crying over Phil Spencer. No, it was because he knew what this meant for the game that he loves. He knew what this meant for the thing that he has advocated for a very long time. So if you've seen that clip floating around and you're like, what in the world? Does this guy love Phil Spencer this much? No, he loves Final Fantasy XIV that much. And seeing it finally come to Xbox is a huge, huge thing for him. Now, there is more to this than just Final Fantasy XIV, okay? This is coming from Digital Trends. This partnership is not just for one game, though. Quote, starting with today's announcement and whenever possible, we are planning to bring our games to Xbox for players to enjoy. Kiru said this while on stage, according to X account Nova Crystallis. Now, this sentiment is reflected in an Xbox Wire post about the port, where Square Enix PR director Luke Carmali states that, quote, this is just the beginning of our journey together. And again, it reiterates here, Final Fantasy XIV is available for PC, Mac, PS4, and PS5. It comes to Xbox X and Series S in the spring of 2024. So what's this gonna look like, okay? What else is potentially going to come? I would imagine this is going to be the less demanding games. Maybe some of the remakes, maybe some of the older games, they'll finally bring them over. This could be good for potentially a Game Pass relationship. I don't necessarily think we're going to see Final Fantasy XIV on Game Pass. If it was coming to Game Pass, you better believe that would have been a part of the announcement. Now, Xbox has to do their own thinking about Game Pass marketing. I just covered this recently. Xbox Game Pass Core doesn't include all those games that hit the catalog. It only has its 25 games. So Microsoft can no longer say, play it day and date on Game Pass. They have to have like a little asterisk to be like, we don't mean Core. Game Pass Core is not getting any of those games day and date. You also need Core for online multiplayer, but Game Pass Console doesn't give you multiplayer, which is weird because it's more expensive. So you lose multiplayer. If you want multiplayer, you have to go up to Ultimate Game Pass or stay all the way down on Core. Super confusing, but you're going to need that because Final Fantasy XIV is an online game. It also has its own sub fee. This is a challenge, I think, to the Xbox ecosystem and the Xbox user base. The challenge being, you got to buy the game. You got to pay a subscription fee. And that's just not something that ecosystem is prone to doing. If you look at any of the sales reports, they always lag behind in total sales. Their consumer base is traditionally saying, hey, when's it coming to Game Pass? I'll wait to play it on Game Pass. That's Game Pass, right? That's the ecosystem. That's a large portion of the user base. So that remains to be seen. But there's bigger questions. What about Final Fantasy XVI? That one just came out, right? Can we get that one over here? I don't see that one coming to the Xbox platform for a couple of reasons. Number one, the game already struggles with performance mode on the PS5. They have their own optimization things and patches that they need to push out. I still haven't seen enough done with performance mode. I am pretty disappointed with Final Fantasy XVI in that regard. I love the game. I absolutely love the combat, the story, all of it. I've been playing it sort of like a TV show, just in pieces. I'm very busy. I'm working on a long tail review. I got early access to a game, so it's difficult for me to put time into Final Fantasy XVI, but that's a huge disappointment that I have about it. They really pushed how this thing was going to squeeze the power out of the PS5 and just be awesome, and it is. But performance mode doesn't look very good. It's jarring. I mean, just do dynamic resolution all the time. Coming out of combat at a locked-in 60 with dynamic resolution, and then I come out of that, and it's like juddering, and I go around town, and it's like a slideshow. That is not enjoyable at all. And because of that, I can't see this game ever coming down enough to run on the Series S. Yoshida even said they can't bring it to PC within 6 months because it's going to take longer than that to port it and optimize it for PC. So you're looking at a significant downgrade for that thing, for Final Fantasy XVI to run on the Series S. I mean, even running at 1080-30, that would look like a dramatically different game, by the way, and I still think it would struggle. Now, many people think, no, long-term, they could do it, they could downgrade it enough. I don't think so. I'm happy to be wrong there. If more people get to experience Final Fantasy XVI I'm okay with that as long as Yoshida's okay with that. If he's okay with the artistic vision and the performance and the scope and the size of Final Fantasy XVI getting shoved through the garden hose of the bottleneck of the Xbox Series S, if he's okay with it, then I'm okay with it, because more people will get to experience the game. I think it's a fantastic game. It's funny how people sort of downplayed Final Fantasy XVI, made fun of it, said it didn't look very good, and now all of a sudden the prospect of getting it, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I need to take all that back. Yeah, that game actually does look awesome and really fun, and we want it on our system. Maybe console tribalism is making you look a little silly. It's time to dial some of that back and just celebrate good games regardless of where they land. So, again, just to restate, I think anything beyond Final Fantasy XIV landing there would either be maybe something older, maybe some sort of a remake, something that's been out for a while. I don't know if we're going to see any one-to-one relationship here, like the idea like, hey, this is just the beginning of our journey together. There's concern there. You hear that language. It's like, well, wait a minute. Should PlayStation scoop up Square Enix and just buy them? They've got this great partnership. They've really enjoyed a lot of almost automatic, exclusivity, and that relationship's been very good for Sony. And is it under threat right now? I don't think so. I think Square Enix knows that a sharp pivot to only putting things on Xbox would be detrimental to their sales and their profitability. They're still going to make games and do what Yoshida said and shop them around. They know their value, they know their worth, and they know Sony pays better, and they know that Sony does very well with exclusivity marketing, and the game performed very well. The Final Fantasy XVI sales are actually quite strong. Just as comparison, like Metroid Dread's like one of the top-selling Metroids at like 3 million, and 3 million copies of Final Fantasy XVI sold in the first week, and it was only on the PS5. Now, people made comparisons to like Final Fantasy VII Remake, which was on multiple platforms, so it's completely unfair comparison. The ratio of 3 million to, the roughly 40 million consoles, PS5s that are out there is actually quite good. So Final Fantasy XVI is doing very well. Square Enix has been very pleased with the sales results. That is in their mind. And so I don't think there's some sort of a relationship threat here. The more titles that can be played by more people, I'm always in support of that. I've always said I think timed exclusivity is good for games because they can optimize for one platform and then bring it to other platforms later. You end up with higher quality games. I think we're seeing evidence of that with a lot of the multi-plat games that are coming out recently. I'm also fully in support of first-party exclusivity. I think that's really good for the consoles themselves. I think it's good for the quality to build something specifically for the PS5. Sadly, we can't really get that on the Xbox ecosystem. You can't build something specifically for the Series X because the Series S has to be considered. But if games like this start landing in other places, I'm totally fine with that. I celebrate that. If more people can play, especially a game like Final Fantasy XIV that is live service, and the more people that can play it, the better. The question will be, is this viable and profitable for Square Enix? Is Microsoft sort of padding the numbers here with money to say, hey, we really want to work with you. We really want your games over here. The optics there would be helpful because we know, according to Phil Spencer, that the Asian market is absolutely pivotal to the success going forward, and Square Enix could be an angle into that marketplace with more of their titles having sort of a history in that market. But they also do incredibly well in the West also. So we'll see how well Final Fantasy XIV does with this big port and what other titles end up coming. This is sort of an all-encompassing video touching on a few things that happened in the wake of it. If you like this video, it usually rolls over into a members-only debrief. That's a great way to come talk with me live, sort of not in a public environment. It's sort of a, just members-only environment. So consider clicking join, become a member. The more you watch, you might get a gifted member. So hit subscribe, hit the bell button, and I'll see you in the next video.